Welcome to the Innovation Storytellers podcast. We talk to innovators and disruptors in R&D, product managers, entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs, innovation thought leaders, and their storytellers who help bring their amazing ideas to life. Now, here's your host, Innovation Storyteller, CEO, speaker, and coach to the world's top innovation teams, Susan Lindner.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Lindner, your host of Innovation Storytellers. And for the last 20 years, I've been helping innovators and disruptors to tell their stories. 10 acquisitions, hundreds of innovative products, hockey stick curves up and down, and many, many new categories later. I wanted to share how great innovations get to market using stories to pave the way. And I'm super excited to have with me a fellow innovation addict like me, maybe I could even say, Fred Schonenberg, who is the CEO and founder of VentureFuel. And Fred, there's so many different things that you do in the innovation space. I'm most enamored with the way you take startups and turn them on to grown-ups and how you get grown-ups, Fortune 500 companies, thinking about how to work with startups. How do you describe what you do every day to your clients and the world at large?
Yeah, our big focus is helping established large companies innovate, accelerate their innovation, right? So how do we help them find startups they can partner with to do pilots? How do we help them run corporate accelerators and really take that innovation mindset that is very natural to an early stage founder and sort of infuse it throughout the larger organization? So we sit in between the large established players and the very early stage players. And I believe very fundamentally in my soul that together, when you bring those two together, it actually works very well for both sides because their weaknesses are opposite one another. It makes it very hard for them to talk and work together. But if you can get that part smoothed out, it's actually a really way for both of them to fuel their ventures, hence our name.
Got you. So tell us just about this juxtaposition between large and small, because, from what I heard of big companies that work with little companies is that the little companies are moving 100 miles an hour, or at least want to move 100 miles an hour. They send over great ideas to the big guys and they get emails back with 20 people CC'd and trying to figure out the process of how the big guy doesn't stomp on the little guy's innovation. So how does it work at first? This mashup between the two, and how do you even put them together?
Yeah, the way I always think about it is the big guys were once little guys too, right? And so it's actually it's very much a flywheel and a repeating circle. So when you start any business, and let's say Pepsi, right, or Coke or whoever, somebody at the earliest stages, they create a product. All of a sudden, consumers like that product. There's product fit and profit come in. So they start figuring out, okay, how do we make more of this product and get it to more people? How do we market it? And then okay, now a lot of people are buying it. They know about it. How do we bring the costs down and the profits up? And it's that moment when sort of companies go from small to big, in my mind, is when you have the product market fit, you sort of have this recurring revenue stream happening. And now it's like, we want to get big. And the way to get big is just you want to get every ounce of profit out of that. So you start to become more efficient. You start to figure out ways you can scale, make incremental growth, and you start to double down on that brand. So more and more human beings start to know, okay, Coca-Cola, delicious, sugar drink, whatever you want to associate with it, right? They
cocaine.
However you look at it, right? But they're just coming at it. They're coming at it. So at that moment, they start to become a big company because they're removing the friction in every part of their business. But because of that removal of friction and that sort of creating guardrails and creating optimization, you lose the ability to sort of move out of those lanes, which then makes it very hard for you to innovate and makes it hard for you to spot new consumer needs that are outside of your core, as well as makes it hard for you to create a new product that doesn't align with what people think of when they think of Coca-Cola. And so that's a great moment for them to then switch their gaze and look back to early stage companies that have none of those guardrails, like none, right? They can do whatever they want. Which is why it seems like they're moving so fast, is because sometimes they just, my client wants this. I need to give it to my client. And so it seems like they're pivoting, but they're really solving client needs in real time because they have to survive. They have to get that revenue in. And in that sort of discovery process, all of a sudden, they start to find the product market fit. And so they now, to accelerate their business, to get it from the small company, they need all the guardrails that the big company already has. And so there's this sort of recurring magic that happens, right? All the small companies want to get big, and the big companies need to find the magic from the small company to continue growing because they've already squeezed all the potential out of that golden nugget that they found long ago. So what we try and do is get them in the room and say, listen, we know you have 50 lawyers and we know you've never met a lawyer, right? So those are the problems. But you both want to make a deal happen. So how can you both give on the terms or the expectations or the timeline, right? To move faster for the big guys and maybe move a little slower for earlier stage company and think through what they really want out of it. And if you can get them to align there, then you have this magic because you've got the enthusiasm and energy and creativity and break stuff of a small company, but all of a sudden it can plug into the well-oiled machine that could take 15 years to build. And so they can accelerate faster through that partnership.
Yeah. So is there a risk, though, of the big guys crushing the little guys? I remember actually having a conversation with Coke's innovation team and them saying, we've tried to do a bunch of acquisitions and we accidentally just rolled over them. Like all of the internal processes and all of that big, heavy stuff wound up becoming too much. And we wound up, with a great formula for our next drink, but it was hard to incorporate all that. Is there a risk in the M&A process or in the co-working and the cooperation together that things can get tough?
Yeah, I think there's a risk in any business, right? Like there's a risk for an early company to go under. There's a risk for all sorts of things to go wrong in the process of launching a business. I think it's a little overhyped. The big company kills you, steals your idea. Like I've been at this for 7 years. I haven't really ever witnessed it up close in any way. But I do think you have to go into this eyes wide open. A big company can take 2 years to do a pilot. And if you put all your eggs in that basket, like, can your business survive that? Like you have to make strategic choices and say, hey, I don't want to go into a 9-month accelerator or incubator with a large company for 50 grand. It's not worth it. But if it does align, right? If it's a really good program, if it has tangible outcomes, if it opens doors you can't open on your own or can't open with hires that you can make, then yeah, it's totally worth it. And like there are moments of frustration where they're moving too slow. So I think in the pilot partnership side, I think it's greatly overhyped, the dangers of the big company. I think in an M&A situation, M&As tend not to work out. The math is there, the numbers are there. It depends what you mean by work out. I think actually for founders, it works out pretty well. You get a nice paycheck usually. So it's an exit strategy. And for the big company, it serves a purpose. The working out part tends to be it doesn't continue to grow at the same speed, or that brand gets killed at some point because it's tied to the behemoth. But that's okay. Also, in some cases, it's because it's getting plugged into something bigger and it's growing the pie. And that's why you sold it, was to get to that point. And now you can go do something else. So I never see this as like Goliath tackling David, like this very adversarial big company versus small company. Like I see it as like the small, cool, I always think of it as sports, right? There's always like the new superstar coming up, the rookie of the year. But like the rookie of the year on a bad team just flounders out in the middle of nowhere and maybe gets on ESPN every once in a while with a highlight. If you put the rookie on like a great team, all of a sudden it makes all the veterans better. It puts enthusiasm into the fan base and they go win championships. And so it's like, how do you make that marriage to make both sides grow and get where they need to go?
Yeah, I'm looking at the basketball on that blackboard behind you there. It must have been really tough for someone to bring on LeBron James to their team right out the get-go, right? Rough.
Well, what's funny is the drawings behind me are actually the patent drawings for the first basketball hoop and first basketball net. I do love basketball. I played through college, and my wife wanted to marry sort of hoops and innovation. So she got that for me as a gift. But I look at it all the time and it makes you think too, right? Like at some point, basketball was just an idea. And now it's, multi-billion dollar global business. And so I think this is actually a good homage, right? To like those big companies were startups not long ago. Some of these drawings are 60 years old, which is a long time, but not really, depending on how you look at it. So yeah, I think it's about going in eyes wide open, both sides knowing what they want and being honest with each other. Like I don't want to spend 2 years to do a pilot, or I don't want to be bought. If you don't want to sell your company, then don't sell it.
That's true. So tell us a little bit about how you become this super matchmaker, right? I know that you have an amazing database of startups that, corporates look to you for to say, who should we work with? I mean, just the selection process, this is harder than The Bachelor. How do you do it, Fred? How do you find like the perfect matchup of corporate and startup?
Yeah, that's very funny.
Maybe you should do that for your next snackathon or milkathon or beerathon that you guys do that I just love so much is, will you accept this rose?
I like it. Yeah, we'll have to get some roses for the next one.
Will you accept this beer?
Exactly. I think what's really challenging to think about is the idea of databases in this world. Startups change so fast. If I talk to the same founder 4 times a year, sometimes it's 2 different business plans. It's all different stages of growth. And these are good startups, right? As much as smaller ones. So we do have a great database that we're always updating. But I think what our secret sauce is we built a network of investors, and it's VCs, angels, seed investors, university labs, other accelerators, incubators that we go to specifically for our large client need. So we will say, hey, we're looking at autonomous robots. And there are a lot of autonomous robots. You can do a Google search. There's a lot of platforms that you can do research on for a long amount of time, and you find a bunch of potential companies. But it's about knowing who's investing in that space, who's become an expert in that space, who do they recommend, and then why does that fit with Anheuser-Busch or Hershey's or whatever client has initiated the ask, because it's that piece, right, that really makes the magic happen, because the company that could pilot with Hershey's is not the company that can pilot with Anheuser-Busch. Sometimes there's override. It's like human beings, right? A company starts to act a certain way. They've got different cultural needs. They have different expectations and likes and speeds. And so really looking at it through a very focused lens of our client is what makes us very good at the matchmaking. Our ability to find and scout companies is this innovation network that we've kind of built over 7 years of getting to know every VC you can imagine and every seed investor and every university that wants to talk with us. And we're able to kind of get a lot of interesting things in from that. And then it's that filtration that is super customized for whomever we're working with.
Yeah. So take us through the steps. Right? So you start off with this incredible ecosystem that you've built. And then some of your treasured clients, the ones that I loved coming to your events and hearing Anheuser-Busch and thinking about some of the products that they've built along with you, right? Or even just the process of thinking about innovation in a different way. Can you give us some examples of those innovations that have come about, right? And really, what's shifted for Anheuser-Busch in the process, or any of the clients that you've worked with, frankly, they just come to mind.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. We work with so many different types of businesses, food and beverage, you've mentioned a few, to people like Comcast, to people like Nike, and each of them comes with a different challenge. A different thing that they're trying to solve. Sometimes it's product innovation, right? We need a new product, and we have our R&D team who outside of our own walls can create something that will be additive to our process. So product innovation is very easy for anyone to sort of wrap their head around. You've mentioned we just finished the snack accelerator, which was for the California Milk Advisory Board. And with that, they were like, we want to enable entrepreneurs to create new snacks that incorporate at least 50% dairy into their recipe, because their clients, the dairy farmers of California, right? So new products hit the market. That means more demand for dairy. It's good for the dairy farmers. So that's a very straightforward, like VentureFuel, we want to go find the best dairy snacks in the world, vet them, bring them into this competition, and then mentor them and help them get from where they are to where they want to be really fast.
So Fred, what is an example of a dairy snack?
Cheese, yogurt, ice cream. So the company that won was called Peekaboo Ice Cream. They actually hide vegetables within the ice cream. So you have chocolate ice cream, but it's filled with cauliflower. And it's like the best chocolate ice cream you've ever had. But if you have young kids, like getting them to eat any vegetables can be a challenge. And so here's a way you can feel good as a parent, giving them something you're already giving them, which is ice cream. And also you can educate them a little bit in the process about what a cauliflower is, what a beet is, and their flavors are just awesome, great branding. So that's an example. The second place company was called Cheese Bits, which was taking Eastern European flavors of cheeses, things I'd never heard of, Scarmoza was one that I really like. And basically it cuts the cheese into shapes that are shareable, like that you would put out on a cheese board, but without you having to slice it, right? So most sliced cheese is like deli cheese and it's kind of stale. This is like the best cheese you've ever tasted, but all like chopped up in little, very easily shareable
Is this like dinosaur nuggets, or is it more akin to let's take the bread and slice it and have $1 billion idea, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is both, right? The packaging was beautiful. The way the cheese is cut is different, which actually makes a big difference to a consumer if you were going to a picnic, like you just grab it and go. But the cheese itself, you've never seen it before and you've never tasted it before. It is legitimately wonderful. Like, I think we had Jackson Janigam, who's one of the CMO next list on everything. He runs direct to consumer for the Clorox company. He was one of the judges and he described it as the next peanuts. He's like, I can't stop eating this. He's like, it's like the ultimate. He's like, I put it down to sample it at the beginning of this competition and I just keep going after it. And like, my wife keeps asking when we're getting another shipment. Like it's great. So, I mean, I think with that, what's interesting, that competition, we had applications from Ghana to Oakland. And so we were able to, because of that network, we have go out and say, hey, here's this opportunity. We get just bombarded with all these different interesting ideas. And so that's where my team will look and say, which of these scale, which of these have the right founder team, which have potential, are they solving a unique need in the marketplace? We then got down to 16 finalists. We mentored all of them. I mean, our mentors are bonkers. It's not like some random person on the street. It is the publisher of Food Network magazine sitting down and talking to them about press. It is, the head of innovation at Nestle, talking to them about how to create a snack, right? Nestle knows a little bit about that. Or the head of Mondelez's Snack Futures, mentored them and was a judge. So it's like a hyper accelerator with the idea of like the only people talking to you are business people that are trying to get you somewhere fast. And then we do a big finals, and then there's a nice prize for both first and second place. It was $200,000 and $100,000 to then take those companies up. And the whole goal, and this is where we're really different. Most accelerators are taking 6% of every startup. The whole thing is how can I get tons and tons of startups and hopefully get Uber, right? As one of them. And then I make $1 billion and I can go live on a yacht, which sounds good. I'd love to live on a yacht. But our view is like, we're working for California Milk Advisory Board. We're working for the dairy farmers. So I actually don't care who wins. I want as many of these companies to get to market, go to market in a big way and drive demand for the dairy farmers, because that's going to obviously means I get rehired down the road, but it also means that they're going to have more demand. They're going to have a better business. And that's what we're hired to do. So that's sort of example A. And I'm sorry for a long answer. When we get to a Pepsi or a Nike or something like that, and they go, we want you to help solve our business problems using startups and new technologies that our competitors don't know about. And so that can be, hey, we're thinking about autonomous robot delivery. Where do we even go to start that conversation? Or it can be like, hey, we've recognized these 3 ingredients we throw away. They're actually just byproducts of our manufacturing. Are there startups out there that use these products to sell things? Could we create another revenue stream for ourselves? Or, the one we're running for Comcast right now, which is also public facing, so I can talk about it a little bit. They're looking at mixed use buildings, right? Where you have apartments and restaurants and, sports stadium or whatever all together. What technology is there to make those mixed use buildings operate faster, better, smarter? Contact tracing, heat mapping, water and energy maintenance, right? All these there's little startups doing interesting things. But when you think of Comcast as like the hub, that's a really big and interesting business for Comcast. So what can they layer in that can become a revenue driver for them down the road, but also make the lives of those people that are living there better, more interesting, right? So we end up doing, I'd say our business is about 50-50 at this point, where it's big public facing accelerators versus behind the scenes. Hey, we have to solve this problem. We're trying to figure out sustainability, and we have a whole team that does it. But like, what startups are out there that we can partner with and do commercial deals with that can give us a competitive advantage versus whatever the market is doing or our competitors?
It's fascinating to listen because I'm also curious about what the internal folks think. One of my guests was a guy named Steve Radar, who runs the Open Innovation Center at NASA. And he said, I want to go outside the walls of NASA to see who else can help us solve space's biggest problems. And, the engineers, he said, looked at each other and said, that's our job. Like, we're space engineers. who outside of NASA can solve our problems better than us? Like, how will this even work? And by the way, isn't that my job? Isn't that what I'm supposed to be doing? And I actually had a chance to talk to a guy from Spotify who said, so do you work on the innovation team? He said, I'm a product manager. It's my job to innovate my product. If I can't do it, I shouldn't be in this job. And so I'm kind of curious, is it a thing about size, like you were talking about, like the corporation gets into these cattle chutes and it really becomes a challenge to begin to innovate across silos, right? It becomes a challenge to, once all the friction is removed, to figure out what the new need is of eliminating more frictions, right? Tell us a little bit about that when like the startups show up for work and the grownups are going like, how does this all come together? Is there any kind of that friction that happens?
For sure, right? Life is ego. Everyone's always navigating their place in the world and their place in the company and what does it mean? And, I think that it's out there, right? It's a real thing that people are like, you hired me to be the head of innovation, or you hired me to engineer this product. Why would I look out to people that don't have my pedigree, that haven't worked here for 20 years? This is threatening, is essentially the reaction, right? But there's a guy I think he was the founder of Sun Microsystem. I'll have to remember his name now. It's totally escaping me. But his sort of comment was Joy. His last name's Joy. It's called Joy's Law. His comment was, no matter how big you are, no matter how great your organization, there's no way you have the smartest people in the world employed by you. Like
in that moment when you need them, right?
Right? And so NASA's the perfect example. Of course, they have the smartest people in space. Like they have them, but they don't have all of them. They have a lot of them, and they have maybe some that have better education or better pedigree. But NASA, no matter how big their budget is, cannot afford every single person that can solve this. And by the way, if they could solve it, it shouldn't be a problem anymore. So if it's still a challenge, that means that they're not solving it either fast enough or efficiently enough, or the real thing that happens is they're so focused on XYZ problem that they literally don't have the bandwidth to focus on ABC.
True.
And ABC is a problem, but it's not as big a problem as XYZ. So you also have an opportunity cost. Are you going to take your best engineers? You're going to put them on your biggest, most immediate problem that you have to solve today. That doesn't make your number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5 challenge go away.
True.
And so you have the opportunity to tackle those now ahead of time and have them moving. And then you bring in your superstar to partner with that startup. That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is like, if I've worked at VentureFuel for 7 years at this point, I have blinders on. I see the world through VentureFuel eyes. No matter what I'm looking at, it is, you name it. I can't look at a basketball hoop without thinking about innovation. Like that's so warped. But anyone else that looks in, they're like, oh, cool. Someone did like a chalk drawing behind you. You must love basketball. And so by looking at things from different vantage points, you get different perspective, different ideas. And I will say the one thing is you cannot recreate the entrepreneurial energy and creativity within a large organization. I just don't believe you can do it 100% because everyone in the big organization is getting paid a salary. And when you get paid a salary, there's a sense of urgency that is just removed. And it's natural, right? You don't have to worry about your next paycheck. You do, but not at the same level as an entrepreneur who literally jumps out of the plane and builds the parachute on the way down. So they're going to go splat. And they have this burning desire on the inside. They have this thing that they have to solve this specific problem. And that specific problem, they can go toe to toe with a NASA engineer on that problem. They can't do the NASA engineer's job. They would lose in an application for the job at NASA. But for whatever the one problem is, they probably can go toe to toe and maybe do it better, or certainly look at it differently and provide a different way to think about it.
Well, it's funny. NASA solves now a lot of problems with open source innovation, as they call it. And when Steve was on the show, he gave us this and listeners, if you haven't had a chance to listen to Steve yet, please do. But Steve said, he gives the example of the potato chip factory. And he said that, potato chips have this last mile problem, which is getting the last bit of grease and oil off the chip before it goes into the bag. Because the last thing anybody wants is to dig their hand in and come out with this greasy, salty mess. And so typically what they would do is they would shake the chips and the oil would eventually come off, right? Or at least it would dry as a substance. And so they decided to issue a query over a platform and disguise it. They didn't want any of the other potato chip manufacturers to figure out how to solve the problem. So the question posed was, how do you remove a viscous layer from a fragile disc? And people could respond, anyone could respond to that question. And one person responded and said, this is actually a sonic problem. And if you adjust the vibration of a sonic wave to a particular frequency, the viscous layer will lift off automatically. And so you need to apply sound to the problem, not mechanics. And so it turned out the person who solved that problem was a violinist. And she noticed the resin coming off of her bow when she played at high frequencies. But no potato chip factory is ever going to hire a violinist to solve this problem, nor do they know that they need a violinist to solve their problem, or even to hire a sonic engineer. And if you did, you would only need them to solve that one problem. And never again, unless the potato chips need a symphony around them all day long. They might be the most delicious potato chips ever, but an elegant harmony of sour cream and onion, who knows?
Right.
but I just found that so enlightening to say, sometimes the most innovative ideas cannot come from inside the house, right? We have to go outside. And so this is also what I've loved about getting your trend reports, because the projection of what is happening next often cannot come from within the house, right?
It's really interesting. I mean, I love the potato chip story. It's also that sort of, there's an old fable, right, of, carpenter always sees everything looks like a nail, or a hammer is like the solution to everything.
Right.
And I think what's interesting about the reason we're able to do trend reports is because we're getting to see what's up and coming from so many different angles. And we sort of put that together and see what trends are sort of popping in different directions. That's our vantage point, right? Is we're wide. Our aperture is wide. If we were just focused on food and beverage, you start to narrow and you start looking at just what makes sense for food and beverage. And they already do that. Like, those guys are the best at food and beverage in the world. So we purposely kind of pull back and look at things with fresh eyes, sort of the innocent mindset of like, I don't need to know how your giant, amazing $50 million factory makes chocolate, right? But like, if you need to figure out how to flip the switch and apply sonic waves to it, that's more interesting to us. So yeah, our trends, we try and look at what problems we're being asked about frequently from multiple different Fortune 500 companies, the unique problems that are popping up in all of our work with them. We then look at that and kind of extrapolate out and go, okay, is this something that is a bigger challenge to a lot of people? Is there an upcoming challenge that maybe they haven't seen yet? And what does our sort of innovation network think about those challenges? And are they excited? Are they investing? Because like a VC, if you think about it, a VC's job is to be a futurist. What 30 years look like, or 10 years? Let's invest in those things. And we're going to make lots of bets. And some we're going to miss. And that's okay, because we're going to get a couple of them right. And so we start to look at like, okay, what is this network making bets on? And how does that overlay with what our Fortune 500 clients are deeming as challenges they want to solve? And that's where the trends come from.
I remember reading one of your trend reports, and it kind of got me laughing a little bit. It was all about workout wear and, athleisure. And I kind of thought to myself as I was reading it, well, I mean, the stuff you were talking about was measuring all different kinds of new wearables and things like that were really cool. But I was like, poor Nike, then their slogan of just do it in the midst of COVID, when all we could do is like buy more athleisure to sit longer, lay longer, eat more. I mean, some people really took it to heart and were working out harder than ever and getting that goddess bod on track. And the rest of us were like, I just need bigger yoga pants.
Hey, they sell the bigger yoga pants. I mean, I think
size matters.
I'd rather be Nike than, Brooks Brothers or somebody that focuses on business wear.
Right.
Because people still can go out for a jog or do yoga in their house. And yeah, I remember the trend report you're referencing. The one that I thought was really interesting was the yoga pants that had IoT in them already and could basically correct you as you were trying to do the yoga pose by a series of vibrations that, your leg wasn't high enough. And what was interesting is the tech part of that was the hardest was getting the pants to be washable without ruining the sensors. And so the founder was from Australia. She was awesome. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of times we're looking at that stuff and like, is Nike going to all of a sudden make all their yoga pants IoT enabled? Like, probably not. But like, what a neat idea. And People used to think like Peloton, like why would you ever have a stationary bike in your house? And now that's a pretty big deal. Good timing for them. So I think some of this, it always evolves, right? Work from home, all of a sudden very hot, obviously for obvious reasons. But what's next in that space and what is interesting and what could become a big opportunity? And I read an awesome article recently about Peloton has the ability or the potential to kind of disrupt Nike because they've got all these people staring at the screen, working out day in, day out, day in, day out with very fit people wearing gear that they go, oh, you know what? Those pants look cool. I want a pair of Peloton pants because I'm not going outside anymore. So I want to have the right gear for this equipment. So I'd be very surprised if their sort of athleisure wear doesn't start doing very well because they have a built-in audience that is super passionate and there's a community there.
That's right. And they can finally fight the massive wedgie issue that hinders every bicycle rider on the planet.
That's actually going to be
no
one
wedgies.
of the trends. Yeah, the trend for next year is no wedgies.
No wedgies ever again. It's over.
The goal. That's the goal.
Yeah, that was really fascinating. And I thought like, yeah, I don't know. My leg's not high enough, right? Yeah, I didn't know that. But thanks, pants. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But you're right. And, this is how Nike started too, right? They were shoes for joggers and for people who took running very seriously. And the SUV was about really going off-road, right? Really taking that safari adventure in your car. And then the rest of us just pulled up to the mall. But for that prime class of yoga teachers, and then eventually the technology makes its way and it trickles down to the rest of us.
Well, it's funny. Whenever I talk to a founder, I ask the question what their special sauce is. What is the one thing that you do that nobody else does?
Right.
And for Nike back in the day, it was, hey, we have the best running shoe for big time runners that are serious about running. Like it was super niche. And that was when running wasn't super cool. And you have to own that. Whatever your thing is, you have to be great at it and you have to have a passionate following. And you're 1,000 true fans, 100 true fans, whatever number it makes you feel good and pays the bill. But then the next stage is like, okay, can you extrapolate this out? Does this start to become something that basketball players like, that stay-at-home moms like, that, whatever? And you can keep moving the goalposts farther and farther, but it's like, you got to get that first thing, that thing that makes you, you and your company. The very popular phrase is like, what's your why? To me, it's like, okay, what's your special sauce? Why did you start the company? What is the pain you were trying to solve? And do you solve it? And do other people pay you to solve it? And like, you get that piece right, then it starts to get fun, right? Because then it's like, well, Peloton, you're in my home. Like, can you go from the bike to next to the bike on the yoga mat? But what if I want to go outside? Can I take Peloton with me? What am I going to wear during this? Are these people celebrities? Like, should they be curating my music? Because like the crossover from Peloton instructors to Spotify apparently is huge. That people like actually follow their Peloton instructor to get playlists now because they like their musical choices, right? So what does that lead to? Is there an entertainment angle, a subscription streaming service? So,
well, Beyonce just signed on with them last week, right? That was the big announcement that it's basically her playlist to work out to.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. And it's all to benefit historical Black colleges. And, there's a lot of interesting things. But again, like Peloton had to be great at that first thing, the thing that they're known for, and then their brand grows around that. So like you have to get that first piece really right.
So is that the other part of the work that you do when you think about those startups that you're going to do that matching with is what's the innovation problem we're trying to solve? And then what's the niche that we can marry to that will give you, Mr. Big Company or Ms. Big Company, that extra special, that dose of special sauce?
Yeah. I mean, we start from the view of what's the big company problem. And then we go try and find the person that solves that problem and only that problem really, really well. And so a lot of times I'll call it a generalist, right? Like somebody that's created a lot of things around the problem we have. And that's usually not the right solution because if they're a generalist, there's generally somebody at the big company that can do what that person does, or they would just hire IBM or whoever the most expensive person is around that area. And that's what their competitors are doing. What we do is we really zone in on what's the one thing that we need to solve. Who's the person that is solving that the best for what the ask is? So when I ask the special sauce question, I'm looking for focus. I'm making sure that this founder has a burning need to solve whatever the problem is. Because if it's not personal for them, if they didn't start the company for the right reasons, there are all sorts of exceptions that people are just great at starting companies and they make billions of dollars and great. But that doesn't work for me. because I have to solve this problem for X brand. So we really look for focus and also a founder that knows what they want. They might not be there yet, but they know where they want to go. So their direction, and it's going to change over time, but like they have a vision for what they're trying to solve. And if that marries up with the challenge the big company has, now there's real synergy because the big company can't solve this problem. That's why they called us. And the small company can't solve this problem at scale without a number of sort of blue chip case studies and a number of proof of concepts. And so that's where this really starts to do really interesting things for both sides.
So, this is innovation storytellers, right? So it goes without saying that in addition to having that passionate founder that you're going to match up with the company, you also need a passionate internal entrepreneur, right? Who's willing to take the reputational risk, take the P&L risk if this goes sideways, have a product roadmap that he is willing to fight in the boardroom for. So tell us a little bit about the stories that need to get told on the corporate side in order to allow that, violinist in the door, that allow that startup to walk through and allow that entrepreneur to actually create the momentum inside that moves it forward. Because without momentum, innovation dies either for the startup or the Fortune 500.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. I think that what we always advise our clients is write the headline you want to read 6 months from now or a year from now, whatever the scope is. What do you want the outcome to be that your boss's boss will see? And you need to kind of lay that out for them and help them see what the future might be. The truth is, I kind of laugh about the budget and the P&L, and I know that all matters, but like this amount of money isn't anything that any of the companies we work with, like it's a rounding error. They're spending this in corporate pens every year, right? Like for what we're talking about. And I mean, it's still significant and a lot of money. And I'm not trying to be flippant with it, but it's like, sometimes you're like, oh, well, what if this fails? And it's like, well, there's a lot of places in your company where things are failing and those things have no opportunity to deliver you exponential growth.
Your posted order from last week for the China office.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's like the paper cups that you order right? It's hundreds, thousands of dollars, right? So maybe figure out a way to use reusable cups and put 200 grand into innovation, right? But I think what's challenging is innovation is fraught with failure, and people have read that over and over again, so they think it's going to fail. And so you have to level set and say, look, the goal for this is to solve this problem, and we have not been able to solve this problem with internal resources. And we all agree this is a problem, correct? Yes. Okay. Once you have buy-in that this is a problem, let's try a new way to solve it. Because if you keep doing the same thing that your competitors are doing or that you are doing, how are you ever going to grow faster? Like there's not like a magical moment that the CMO of Moshi Ice Cream, Russell Barnett, awesome guy. He described to me, he goes, I don't want to tweak the engine to make the already built car go a little faster. I want to build a new car. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was such a great visual because so many times you hear people saying, we need exponential growth. We have to grow this percent to keep Wall Street happy and blah, 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 blah. How are you going to do that? We're going to do the same thing we did last year. Or we're going to make our Facebook spend this much better. And it's like, man, there are only so many of those levers you can pull over and over in time before you need to go, hey, maybe we're not driving the right car. Or should we change tires altogether, right? Should we try something different? So I think with innovation, you have to settle on what the challenges you want to solve. You have to show the potential for solving it. And that's a big one, is playing out the financials of like, hey, we may take a loss. We may miss on this 3 or 4 times. But if we get it right on the 5th time, here's our all-in investment. And this is the grail. If we get it right on one of the next 25 times, it will pay for itself. My favorite graph that we have in our deck, which we don't share publicly, is one of our clients. And we found an innovation for them. It was actually an ad tech startup out of Israel. And the amount of money it saves for them globally pays their VentureFuel fee until I think it's 3025.
Oh my God.
The year 3025, right? So it's like...
And that's without upping your rates.
Yeah, I should have factored in our future rates because in 3020, we're going to be expensive.
Through the roof, Fred.
Big year. But I mean, it's the upside. I always say it's incremental revenue with exponential potential. And so you got to tell the story. And I think when you have a win, you've got to get that out internally. It's just, you and I have talked about this before. It's old school press. Like you can have the best thing in the world, but if nobody knows about it, it didn't happen. So you have a success. You need to figure out how to get that around the organization. I think you and I have made this joke before, but like everyone that works with VentureFuel gets promoted. It just happens because all of a sudden they're seen as the one that's coming up with new ideas and creative solutions to problems. And it's good for your career to be the one that's coming up with those solutions. So part of that is taking your success and making sure your boss and your boss's boss and the person next to you and the person in global and whatever see what you're doing. And the beauty of innovation is it's a story people want to hear. People don't want to hear about 0.02% growth, or that, you put some jalapenos on the chips and you've got a new line that's next to the old line and it's sort of interesting and not really. Like, that's not a cool story. But like all of a sudden you've created something that's not been done before. You've taken a problem that's been with the business for years and solved it. Now you're a superstar.
So part of this is also looking at your portfolio, because what you're talking about really is the moonshot, right? That's that breakthrough thing, which we'd always love to be able to promise. But do you think it's wise for the internal innovation team to have an 80% portfolio of stuff we have a pretty good belief that that's going to hit? We have some 50-50 risks, and then we have like a 10% shot of making it. Like, do you think that's how chief innovation officers should look at their innovation?
If they're investing, if they have a corporate venture capital group, that's sort of an interesting way we can talk about them thinking about it. I think about actually like doing commercial agreements and pilots and things that are, I think the success rate goes way up. I mean, like in terms of getting a pilot off the ground that pays for itself or has good ROI, like it's not as risky as people would have you think, right? You're not doing moonshots. I say, sorry for the basketball analogy, but like, I'm like, there are jump shots and there are moonshots. And like, you got to hit a lot of jump shots. Like that's how you win. Because like a moonshot takes a long time.
That 3-pointer from the opposite end of the court.
Yeah. It's like, if your odds are low, it's fantastic when it happens, but unless it's worth a ton of points, you don't necessarily need to shoot that far out. So depending on the ask, it's like, I think that's where I level set with like, what do you want out of this? What is the goal? Is the goal for some sort of flashy innovation theater that doesn't deliver any results? You don't really care and you're going to do this for 2 years and move on. Cool. Let's go in eyes wide open. Nobody's ever said yes to that. If it's like, hey, we're trying to solve a pain point in our business and we need new ways to do that, there's not a lot of risk in that because you're already spending money trying and failing clearly because it's a problem for you. So let's go find new ways to attack this. And let's make sure we measure if this is delivering results. And you try a couple different ways at it so that you may miss on, let's say you take 3 approaches, 2 may not work out, but 1 works out. And the return on that 1 covers the other 2. So it's not like all or nothing all the time. It's lots of jump shots. You're going to miss a few of them. But overall, over the course of a year, you're going to be able to look at that and say, hey, we did 10 pilots, 50 pilots, whatever the number is, depending on the organization. And this many have succeeded to the point that we're scaling them globally in our organization. And they're going to deliver this much savings or this much growth over the next 5 years. Usually that number, you're good. Like that's going to justify everything you've done retroactively as well as in the future. And it's not a moonshot win. Like the one I mentioned was a huge moonshot, right? But like all throughout, like you're getting these wins that are going to make the business better, smarter, and also it creates disruption insurance. When you're trying new and different things, it means you have your thumb on the pulse of what's happening and what's coming, and you don't get surprised.
So I want to take you into like the hot seat portion of our podcast. So I ask all of my guests the same question. So if you had to fill in the blank, innovation is, how do you define it, Fred?
Innovation is opportunity. It's opportunity for creative thinking, for doing things, not because it's the way you've always done them, but in a way that is going to deliver meaningful results.
And the innovation that you most admire, your favorite innovation?
The innovation I most admire, just because we talked about it, Peloton, it has kept me from gaining 500 pounds during the pandemic, and it is my break. It is like my Zen moment. I can put my headphones in. So I think the idea of creating a community virtually is what's special about it. There's the athlete part, but it's really the fact that you can have a little bit of that virtual socialization.
And if there's an innovation that you'd love to see, that thing that kind of like pisses you off, or like, God, that would be so awesome if someone could just solve for, what would that thing be? What problem would you love to see eliminated?
Serendipity. I would love somebody to figure out how to recreate serendipity when we're not all in the same room. I think live events, you bump into somebody, the person that you've been looking for to solve whatever your problem is, or open up a door, is in plain sight. You don't know that they're there. You bump into them and all of a sudden it unlocks whatever for you. I think that is digitally and virtually has proven to be very difficult to manufacture serendipity and opportunities to bump into that special person. That's what makes life interesting and can take you down roads you didn't know you were going. So that's, if someone can figure out how to optimize for those moments where you can be really surprised and experience something unique, I'll come in on that.
Oh my gosh, how to bottle serendipity. That's amazing. I love that answer. Fred, thank you so much for your time today. How can people find out more about VentureFuel and the work that you do and the clients that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn, we're all over it all the time. So if you just go to VentureFuel, all one word, at LinkedIn, you will see the company. And I'm Fred Schonenberg. I'm also on LinkedIn all the time. Our website's venturefuel.net. We're on all the social channels, but LinkedIn is where we start with everything. So that's the best place to go.
Yeah, and definitely signed up for those trend reports. They will blow your mind. They're amazing. Fred, thank you so much for being on Innovation Storytellers today. Just keep telling those amazing stories. We love hearing them.
Thanks, Susan. It's been a lot of fun.
Take care.
All right, you too.
This innovation story has ended, but yours is just beginning. Go to innovationstorytellers.com, download the free Innovation Storytelling Blueprint, and sign up to pre-order Susan's book, Innovation Storytelling. Get the resources, runway, and recognition you deserve due out this spring. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until the next innovation story.